Yesterday, I had the pleasure of delivering a couple of lunch and learn sessions virtually to a client around change and management. There was a session for leaders on leading change and also a session for staff in navigating change. The client itself is going through a period of change, restructure. But during the sessions, I was reflecting on my own experiences with redundancy. And in that reflection, I thought back to the first time I was made redundant. It was actually 36 years ago. So imagine it. End of 1988, I was working in recruitment and I was looking to move into direct sales or on the road sales. And this organisation called Satex were recruiting. They were actually known in their industry of recruiting people who didn't have sales skills, but their training was second to none and they could turn people into salespeople. So Satex was one of the five big stationery companies of its time. And I started with them in January 1989. And you started off, your induction was the first 2 weeks of training. Week one was product training. And trust me, in that week, I got to learn every single size of paper, perhaps A6, so small size, to your A4, which is the standard one you have in your printers, right up to A1 poster size, and the appropriate envelopes that you would use from your small, I think there were C6s, through to your DL, the oblong one you do for posting letters. So I knew all about those. At that time, people were using electronic typewriters and various types of printers, from dot matrix printers. I think laser jets were just starting to come in then as well. But anyway, I had to memorize for all the different types of electronic typewriters that were out there, all the different ribbons that would go in these typewriters. I had to know all the different types of cartridges that would go in the dot matrix printer. So yeah, my product knowledge around stationery supplies was immense. All the types of pens, everything to do with stationery, from the folders to different books, etc. The second week was the sales training, where we had to learn a full page script, and this script would take you through a whole sales process, beginning to end sales process. So we did a lot of cold calling, and I would know, I'm walking around different industrial estates, that I could go into a small organization and generally come out with a sale just through the process of following this script. And even within the script, you could overcome objections and meet customers' needs and then come away with a sale. It was a fantastic company and their training was second to none. And I remember, gosh, yeah, I had a company car back then, and that was the good old Vauxhall Nova saloon. We didn't have mobile phones at that time, but we had pagers. We also, with that company, we had a uniform, and the uniform was actually Winsmore suits. We really dressed the part when we would go out to visit customers. So anyway, felt quite safe in this organisation because, you know, they invest a lot in their sales staff and in their training, and you go out and you make sales. In the June of 1989, about 30 of us members of staff were summoned down to London via pager. It was like, can you come to London literally the next day? Didn't actually say why we were summoned. And actually, I didn't know at the time that there was 30 of us summoned. I just had that, so right, okay, going down. Now, my car was due in for a service that day. So I thought, well, I'll get the train down and get the tube to the office. Got to the office on this particular day and noticed, yeah, there were 30 other colleagues. And what was different about us all was we were all salespeople that worked outside the M25 and across the country. So what we were told there was that WH Smiths, who we still have here, but they were a very big organisation back then, they had bought all of these top 5 companies, including ourselves, basically took us over. There was us, there was Cartwright Bryce, I think it was Pentagon, was the other, was it Sandhurst? I think it was Chapman's, I think was the other one. So these were the big 5. They had taken us over and they had decided that they no longer wanted to have, particularly in Satex's case, they no longer wanted to have salespeople outside the M25. So that was a bit of a blindside. And if you're kind of looking at the transition curve, the change curve, Kubler-Ross's change curve, we were really in that shock status, a bit like deer caught in headlights, totally blindsided. It was like, right, okay. So then what does that mean? And it was basically saying, so we are going to have to let you go. And the next question was, and I am paraphrasing here, it was a reasonably long meeting. I can't remember if it was an hour or a couple of hours. But it was, who's brought their car down with them today? Now, I believe I might have been the only one who hadn't brought their car. There may have been one or two others, but majority of people had driven in their cars. And back then, you had to keep all your customer records and keep everything in your car. So your car was your office because you worked from home, you could make calls, and then, yes, you kept everything in your car. So obviously majority of people put their hand up. So they said, right, hand over your keys. You're finishing now. We will give you the train fare home. Yes, that's right. Talk about being blindsided. I say luckily, because my car was in for service, I said, well, I've come down here by train, so I'll have to come back tomorrow. So I was really basically given, yes, come back tomorrow with your car. As you can imagine, that was a shock to the system. And as we all know, since then, anytime you have those meetings where you're told something's going on with the organisation and you're basically going to be made redundant or lose your job or let you go, whatever terminology they used to use back then. And so it was, right, okay, what do we do next? And because the main driver there was WH Smith had taken us over, this is now the new model that they wanted to work with, what you'd call a target operating model. And so we had to go. So it was pretty understandable. I didn't take it personally, could see how they were working, and yes, we had to go. And again, when I said how this organization, had a really good reputation for their training, I think within a week, I was contacted and approached by a local stationery company based in Milton Keynes to say, look, we've heard, and actually, yes, the news about the WH Smith takeover and lots of people being made redundant. So they were very much aware, of us. So I was contacted because I covered the area, and no doubt customers were aware of me in the Milton Keynes and Northamptonshire area. Got in touch, said, look, we heard you've been made redundant. We'd like you to come and work for us. It wasn't even a case of have an interview, it was, we'd like you to come and work for us. So started working with this local company, and it's a wonderful company, family run. I think I covered Milton Keynes, would it be the east of Oxfordshire, the south of Northamptonshire. Did that successfully for 2 years. Then, again, a fateful thing happened, again a bit blindsided. One of the clients of this organisation, whom they'd relied on for a very big proportion of the company's turnover. Again, thinking back then, I remember it was big. It could have been 2/3 to 75% of the business was just with this customer. And that was supplying them stationery, that was supplying them even furniture items. So it was a very big contract. This client went into administration. Consequently, that the knock-on effect to this organisation was, well, kind of that was not all our chickens, but majority of our chickens in one basket there, all our eggs in one basket there. And so we're going to have to let you go. Again, blindsided, but I could see there. Now, you could say the company were sitting quite comfortable, did everything was going to happen with this client. But yes, that was another external driver that had a consequence to it. So the reason I'm sharing this is, fast forward to where we are now. And my last redundancy was I finished at a local authority, was it last September? And that was a long process going through consultation and restructure, quite a drawn out affair. But providing organisations get their communication right, providing they can provide you, the individual, with the reasons behind the change in the organisation or a restructure or their operating model or way of working and the way they want to go. And it's the role that is being made redundant. It's not you in the roles, particularly if there's quite a few of those roles. It's like, no, we need to get rid of that role and there's more than one. Okay, if there's only one role that you're doing, you may also take that personally. But if a company decides we have no reason for this particular role, it's no benefit, or we can't afford it, whatever that may be, then that organisation needs to communicate that as effectively as possible and as open and transparently as possible. That doesn't always happen, I know, but it's a way to help you through. As I said, with redundancy, it is one of those areas that as soon as you hear that word and as soon as you yourself may be hit with the notice of redundancy, whether it's compulsory or voluntary, I think in the two examples I get, they were compulsory, is that automatic emotional roller coaster that you get on, because you are then thinking you're and when we talk about change management, you get into that. So how does this impact me? How's this going to affect me? And then you start thinking of your basic needs of, right, how am I going to, I'm not going to be without, I will be without a salary. How am I going to pay for my bills? How am I going to pay for food? How am I going to pay for my kids? All sorts of things run through your mind because this has been done to you. And not to say that hearing those drivers and understanding them makes the pain any better, but sometimes it can reduce the thought of they're really targeting me specifically, as opposed to the role. I don't disagree that sometimes that may happen, and depend on how an organisation operates. Ideally, it shouldn't do. It should be driven specifically. But in the main, I think I've had redundancies many times over the past decades, and it's generally been driven by external drivers, whether it's been regulatory or legislative, or cuts in funding, or cuts in customer base, or mergers, takeovers. You often can't escape it, but my advice as well would be to try and keep an eye on what's happening within your organisation. If you have news sections on your own website, check those out. If you're in a particular industry or sector, we have the internet now, which I didn't have back then. But look at what's happening in your industry or sector. Look at news, look at LinkedIn, because sometimes you can get a bit of a heads up. And if you can get that bit of a heads up of what's happening, even things in other countries, if you're an organization that exports or imports or does a lot of business, across the globe, check out what is going on so that you can start to prepare yourself what might be coming down the line. Sometimes people may find it's easier to put their head in the sand and just say, look, I'll just let it sweep over me and whatever happens, happens. And then you're blindsided or you're shocked. What's that saying? Forewarned is forearmed. Sometimes it helps. But you have to look after yourself. You have to be very self-aware of your own well-being during these times. Try not to withdraw into yourself. Try and talk to your own network, whether that's family or friends or work colleagues or previous work colleagues or networks online. Share it, because generally you're not the only one who's going through this. Each person's experience is going to be individual to them. However, by sharing and talking it through, you can start to reduce and lessen the effect and impact it is having on you. So just wanted to share that with you today. I do hope it helps. And if I can support you in any way, please do drop me a message or, make a comment, and I'll do my best to see how I can support you. Thank you for watching.